Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're going to do a deep dive on something that could totally change Cambodia's future. Their brand new law on public-private partnerships.
Oh, yeah.
You know, those projects where the government teams up with private companies to build those big things?
Yeah?
Like highways or power plants. That's what we're talking about.
Okay.
But we're not just skimming the surface here.
No.
We're going to go deep to figure out what this law really means for Cambodia.
Right.
And what you should be watching for as things unfold.
Yeah, this is fascinating because Cambodia is jumping into a global trend. Countries everywhere are experimenting with PPPs to try and fast-track their development.
Yeah.
But the real question is, does this law have what it takes to make sure Cambodia actually benefits?
Right. Because putting it all down on paper is one thing.
Yeah.
But making it work in real life is another.
Absolutely.
This law got the royal stamp of approval from King Siamoni himself just back in 2021. So, they're taking it seriously.
Yeah.
And Article 1 lays out some pretty lofty goals. Efficiency, transparency, and most importantly, making life better for Cambodians, both economically and socially.
Sure, for sure.
But are those just nice-sounding words, or is there real substance behind them?
That's $1 million question, isn't it?
Yeah.
We need to look beyond the, feel-good rhetoric and see if the law provides the mechanisms to actually achieve those goals.
Right.
And that starts with understanding who's calling the shots.
Well, Articles 4 through 6 give a surprising amount of power to one ministry.
Okay.
The Ministry of Economy and Finance, or MEF for short. They're basically the PPP quarterbacks, reviewing projects, managing the money, even having the final say on contracts.
Wow.
Do you think that much power concentrated in one place is a good thing?
Well, you can see why they'd want strong oversight.
Yeah.
Think about it. You've got private companies naturally motivated by profit,
right,
and the government aiming for the public good. Those two don't always see eye to eye. So the MEF's job is to act as a referee, making sure Cambodia's interests are protected.
Right.
But too much power can be a slippery slope, right?
Yeah.
That's definitely something to keep an eye on.
Okay, so we've got the MEF as the big decision maker.
Okay.
But what kind of projects are we even talking about here?
Article 8 lays out a surprisingly diverse menu of eligible sectors.
Okay.
Going way beyond the usual roads and bridges, think telecom, clean water systems, even tourism and social housing.
Wow, that's a pretty wide range.
Yeah.
I guess they're really trying to use this law to touch every aspect of development, huh?
It does suggest a broad vision for development.
Okay.
But remember, it's not just about building things.
Right.
It's about building the right things.
Yeah.
And that's where Article 9 comes in, emphasizing the need for value for money.
Yeah.
It's not enough to just get a project built. It needs to be the best deal for Cambodia with a clear return on investment.
Okay.
Does this law actually deliver on that promise? That's what we'll be examining.
All right, let's talk money.
Okay.
Articles 12 through 16 get into the financial nitty-gritty. And Cambodia isn't just talking the talk.
Right.
They're putting their money where their mouth is, literally. They're setting up 2 new funds.
Okay.
The Project Development Facility, or PDF, to help pay for the initial planning stages.
Right.
And the Viability Gap Financing, or VGF, which is basically a way to sweeten the pot for investors who might be hesitant to take on risky projects.
Interesting.
So,
These funds are interesting because they demonstrate a commitment to making PPPs work.
yeah.
But are they big enough to make a real difference?
Right.
And what are the potential downsides?
Yeah.
Will Cambodia become too reliant on foreign investors? These are questions worth considering.
Okay, so we've got projects, we've got money.
Okay.
Now we need partners, right?
Yeah, we need partners.
Articles 17 through 23 lay out the rules for picking those private sector players.
Okay.
And they give the government 2 main options. Competitive bidding, kind of like an auction where companies battle it out to offer the best terms.
Oh, wow.
Or direct negotiation, which is more of a behind closed doors approach. What are your thoughts on those 2 methods? Which one sounds more appealing to you and why?
Well, competitive bidding certainly has the advantage of transparency. It's all out in the open, which theoretically helps prevent favoritism and ensures the best deal for Cambodia.
Right.
But direct negotiation might be faster, and sometimes speed is crucial, especially for urgent projects.
Yeah.
It's a classic trade-off, balancing transparency with efficiency.
It makes you wonder, in the real world, how often will they choose speed over transparency?
That's definitely something to watch for.
Okay, so let's say a company has been chosen, whether through open bidding or those closed-door negotiations.
Okay.
What happens next? Do we just start building?
Not so fast.
Oh.
Now comes the crucial step of hammering out the PPP contract, and this is where the rubber really meets the road. Articles 24 through 30 outline the key provisions, and believe me, the details matter.
I can imagine. It's all got to be spelled out who's responsible for what, who pays if costs go over budget, how long the partnership lasts, all that good stuff, right?
That all has to be right there.
What are some of the things that jump out at you from these articles?
Well, one thing that stands out is the emphasis on risk allocation.
Okay.
That's a fancy way of saying who takes the hit if things go wrong.
Right.
Is it the government or is it the private company?
Mm-hmm.
A well-drafted contract will clearly define those responsibilities, which is crucial for protecting both sides.
It's like a prenuptial agreement for infrastructure projects.
Exactly. It helps avoid messy divorces down the line.
Okay.
Another important point is ensuring reasonable prices for users.
Right.
After all, the whole point of these PPPs is to benefit the public.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're building a toll road, for example, you want to make sure the tolls aren't so high that only the wealthy can afford to use it.
Right. You don't want to create a situation where the public ends up paying the price for these grand development schemes.
Yeah.
Both literally and figuratively.
Exactly.
But having these provisions in the contract is one thing, enforcing them is another.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
A good contract is only as good as its enforcement.
Right.
So how will Cambodia ensure that these contracts are actually followed?
Mm-hmm.
And what happens if they're not? These are the questions we'll be exploring further as we dive deeper into the practical implications of this law.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
All right. So we've laid the groundwork. We know the what of this law, but now let's get into so what? How will all of this actually play out in the real world? What will this mean for Cambodia, for the people, for everyday life?
That's where the rubber really meets the road, isn't it?
Mm.
It's one thing to have a law on paper, but how it translates into actual changes on the ground is what truly matters.
So let's get practical. Let's say we want to build a brand new state-of-the-art hospital in Phnom Penh, maybe specializing in something Cambodia really needs, like cardiology. Could we do that under this PPP law?
Absolutely. Remember that list of eligible sectors we talked about? Healthcare is right there on the menu. So building a hospital definitely fits the bill. Imagine you're a healthcare provider. You see this need in Cambodia, and you've got the expertise to make it happen.
Okay, so I'm a savvy healthcare entrepreneur. I've got my blueprints, and I'm ready to pitch my dream hospital to the Cambodian government. What happens next? Who do I call?
Well, your first call would be to the Ministry of Health. They'd be your main point of contact, the implementing agency or IA for this project. They'd be the ones to evaluate your proposal and decide if it aligns with Cambodia's overall healthcare strategy.
Right, because it's not just about building any hospital. It's about building the right hospital in the right place at the right price. And speaking of price, they'd also be thinking about that value for money concept, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. They'd want to see a clear return on investment. They'd scrutinize your proposal, looking at things like feasibility, potential benefits for the public, and of course the cost.
So let's say the Ministry of Health loves my pitch. They're on board. Am I good to go?
Not quite yet. Remember that powerful Ministry of Economy and Finance, the MEF? Well, the Ministry of Health would submit your proposal to them for review. The MEF would do their own due diligence, making sure everything is financially sound and that the project aligns with Cambodia's broader economic goals.
So the MEF is like the final boss I need to defeat to make my hospital dream a reality. What if they give me the green light? Then can I start building?
Well, first, the government would officially designate your hospital as an eligible project, adding it to the priority PPP project list. Then comes the question of how to actually award the contract. Remember those two methods we discussed earlier? Competitive bidding and direct negotiation.
Right. So it's either a public bidding war where everyone can see who's offering what, or a more private closed-door negotiation. Which one would they choose for my hospital project?
It really depends. If it's a relatively straightforward hospital, competitive bidding might make sense. But if it's something highly specialized, like a cutting-edge cardiology center, they might prefer direct negotiation with a company that has a proven track record in that area.
So competitive bidding is like going to a bustling market, while direct negotiation is more like going to a master craftsman for a custom-made piece.
Exactly. Each method has its pros and cons.
Okay, so after all that, let's say I've won the contract. The ink is dry. Can I finally grab my hard hat and get to work?
Not so fast. Now it's time to negotiate the actual PPP contract. And this is where the real nitty-gritty comes in. Who's responsible for what What happens if there are cost overruns? How long will the contract last? All of those details need to be hammered out.
And this is where those articles about risk allocation and reasonable prices come into play, right?
Exactly. The MEF will be looking over everything with a fine-tooth comb, making sure the contract is fair, sustainable, and protects Cambodia's interests.
So it's like having a super lawyer on your side, making sure you don't accidentally sign away the farm.
That's a good way to put it. The MEF's role is crucial in safeguarding Cambodia's interests and ensuring that this PPP truly benefits the country.
Okay, so the contract is signed, construction is underway. But what if things go wrong? What if there are unexpected delays or disagreements?
That's where those dispute resolution mechanisms come in. Remember, they provide a roadmap for handling disagreements.
Right, like mediation or arbitration. It's like having a safety net in case things get bumpy.
Exactly. It's all about having a clear process in place to resolve conflicts fairly and efficiently.
Okay, we've walked through a hypothetical hospital project, but this law covers so much more than healthcare. What are some other potential areas where we could see PPPs popping up in Cambodia?
The possibilities are vast. Imagine a high-speed rail line connecting Phnom Penh to Siem Reap, slashing travel time and boosting tourism. Or how about a PPP to develop solar or wind farms, helping Cambodia transition to a more sustainable energy future?
That's amazing. Clean water systems, waste management, even affordable housing projects. The potential is huge.
This law is like giving Cambodia a toolbox full of new possibilities. But remember, tools are only as good as the people who use them.
Right. It's all about how they're used, who benefits, and whether they truly improve the lives of Cambodians. But surely not everyone is thrilled about this new law, right?
That's right. Whenever you're talking about large-scale development projects, there are always concerns and criticisms.
So what are some of the potential downsides? What should people be watching out for?
Well, one concern that's often raised with PPPs is transparency. Critics argue that the process can be too opaque, with deals struck behind closed doors that might not be in the public's best interest.
So it's that whole who's really benefiting from this deal question.
Exactly. That's why independent monitoring and strong accountability mechanisms are so important to ensure that PPP projects are truly serving the public good.
And what about the environmental and social impacts? These projects can be huge and disrupt communities or ecosystems.
Absolutely. The law mentions environmental and social impact assessments, but how rigorous will they be? Will they have real teeth? Will they actually influence project decisions? That's something to watch closely.
Right, because it's one thing to say you care about the environment, but it's another to actually prioritize those concerns over profits.
Precisely. And then there's the issue of debt. PPPs often involve the government providing financial guarantees or subsidies. If those projects don't generate enough revenue, the government can be left holding the bag saddled with a heavy debt burden.
It sounds like there's a lot that could go wrong if these projects aren't managed carefully.
There are definitely risks.
No.
But many of them can be mitigated with strong oversight, transparency, and public engagement. Citizens need to be informed, have a say in how these projects are developed, and hold decision makers accountable.
So it's not just about the government and private companies. It's about making sure these projects are truly serving the needs of the people. But that brings us to another important point, right? This isn't Cambodia's first rodeo with PPPs. They already have some experience under their belt.
That's right. They've already dipped their toes into the PPP waters even before this new law came into effect.
Oh, really? Tell me more. What kind of PPP projects has Cambodia already undertaken?
Well, one prominent example is the Phnom Penh-Sihanoukville Expressway, which opened just a couple of years ago in 2022. That was a $2 billion project developed through a PPP between the Cambodian government and a Chinese company.
Wow, a $2 billion expressway. That's a pretty big deal. What impact has it had?
It significantly reduced travel time between the capital and the coast, boosting both trade and tourism. It's also created jobs and spurred economic activity along the corridor. It's a concrete example of how a well-executed PPP can bring tangible benefits to Cambodia.
So a success story. Any other examples?
Other interesting areas, the development of special economic zones, or SEZs. These are designated areas that offer tax breaks and other incentives to attract foreign investment. Several SEZs in Cambodia have been developed through PPPs, creating manufacturing hubs that generate jobs and export.
It sounds like these early PPPs have laid a foundation for this new law. But as we've discussed, there are also potential downsides.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's why it's so important to learn from both the successes and the failures. What worked well in these earlier projects? What could have been done better? These are the questions Cambodia needs to be asking as it moves forward with this new PPP law.
So it's like having a dress rehearsal before the main performance. They've got a chance to fine-tune their approach and hopefully avoid any major missteps. But this law isn't just happening in a vacuum, right? There's a whole global PPP landscape out there.
That's right. Cambodia is entering a global arena, and it's important to understand how PPPs are playing out around the world.
Yeah.
What are the trends? What are the success stories? And perhaps most importantly, what are the cautionary tales?
Okay, so let's broaden our horizons. What can Cambodia learn from other countries' experiences with PPPs? Who's doing it well and who's maybe stumbled a bit along the way?
All right, we're back, and we're going global.
Yeah.
We've talked about Cambodia's new PPP law. We've looked at some potential projects.
But now let's zoom out and see how PPPs are playing out around the world.
Okay.
Because Cambodia isn't exactly reinventing the wheel here, right?
That's right. PPPs have been around for decades, and there's a lot Cambodia can learn from other countries' experiences,
Right.
both good and bad.
So who are the PPP all-stars? Who's really knocking it out of the park?
Well, the UK often gets mentioned as a PPP pioneer.
Okay.
They've been at it since the 1980s, and they've really refined their approach over the years.
So the Brits are like the PPP veterans. What's their secret sauce?
One of their strengths is standardization.
Okay.
They develop these really clear, well-defined contracts
Yeah.
and a robust system for allocating risk that helps reduce uncertainty and makes investors feel more comfortable because they know what to expect.
It takes the guesswork out of the equation, which is good for everyone involved.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And they've also got these strong regulatory bodies that provide oversight and make sure everything's running smoothly.
So the UK is like the PPP gold standard.
Yeah, you could say that.
But surely not every country has been so successful, right? Are there any cautionary tales, any PPP horror stories we can learn from?
Unfortunately, yes.
Hmm.
There are plenty of examples of PPP projects that have gone off the rails,
Oh.
often because of poor planning, lack of transparency, or just plain bad luck.
Ooh, spill the tea. Give me some juicy examples.
Well, one case that often comes up is a highway project in India.
Oh, okay.
It's supposed to be this grand infrastructure project connecting major cities, but it ended up being a nightmare.
Really?
Delays, cost, overruns, disputes between the government and the private company. It was a mess.
Sounds like a classic PPP gone wrong. What happened?
Well, they made some pretty unrealistic traffic projections.
Okay.
There were problems acquiring the land they needed,
Yeah.
and they just didn't have a clear process in place for resolving disagreement.
Uh-huh.
In the end, it cost the government way more than they planned,
Oh, wow.
and the public had to wait years for the benefits to materialize.
It's a good reminder that PPPs are not a magic solution. They can be incredibly complex, and there are a lot of moving parts that need to be managed carefully.
Exactly. And that's why it's so crucial for Cambodia to learn from these mistakes. They can look at these cases and think, okay, how do we avoid making those same errors?
Right. It's about studying the playbook, both the wins and the losses, to figure out the best strategy. But it's not just about specific projects, right? There are also broader trends in the global PPP world that Cambodia needs to be aware of.
Absolutely. And one trend that's particularly relevant to Cambodia is the growing role of China.
Yes. We saw that with the Phnom Penh Sihanoukville Expressway. Chinese companies are becoming major players in PPPs globally, especially in developing countries.
That's right. And it presents both opportunities and challenges.
All right.
On the one hand, Chinese companies often bring much-needed capital and expertise. They're often willing to take on projects that Western companies might shy away from.
So they're filling a gap, providing funding and know-how that might not be available otherwise.
Exactly.
Right.
But there are also concerns about transparency and accountability.
Right.
Some critics worry that these deals are being made behind closed doors
Yeah.
without proper scrutiny.
Yeah.
And there are also concerns about debt sustainability.
Okay.
If a country takes on too much debt from China, it could find itself in a vulnerable position.
Right. So it's a balancing act. Cambodia needs to carefully weigh the potential benefits and risks of partnering with Chinese companies, just like they would with any other investor.
Precisely. And another global trend that's really starting to shape the PPP landscape is the growing emphasis on sustainability.
Ah, yes. Everyone's talking about going green these days. How is that playing out in the world of PPPs?
Well, more and more governments are demanding that PPP projects not only boost economic growth,
Right.
but also meet environmental and social standards. They want projects that minimize pollution, protect ecosystems, and benefit local communities.
So it's not just about building things anymore. It's about building them in a way that's responsible and sustainable.
Exactly. And this is where Cambodia has a real opportunity to shine.
Yeah.
They've got incredible natural beauty and a rich cultural heritage, and they can leverage those assets to attract investors who are looking for sustainable and ethical projects.
It's like marketing Cambodia as a green PPP destination.
That's a great way to put it. They can position themselves as a country that's committed to doing development differently in a way that benefits both people and the planet.
So we've covered a lot of ground today.
Wow.
From the nitty-gritty details of Cambodia's new PPP law to the broader global context. What's the one key takeaway you want listeners to remember?
I think the most important thing is that PPPs are a tool.
Yeah.
And like any tool, they can be used for good or for ill. The outcome depends entirely on the choices that are made by the government, by private companies, and by citizens.
So it's not just about the law itself. It's about how it's implemented, who benefits, and who's holding whom accountable.
Exactly. And ultimately, the success of Cambodia's new PPP law will be judged not by the number of projects it generates, but by whether it truly improves the lives of the Cambodian people.
That's a powerful message to end on. So there you have it, folks. We've taken a deep dive into Cambodia's new PPP law, explored its potential, its risks, and the global trends shaping its future. But as we've said throughout this deep dive, this is just the beginning of the story. The real test is yet to come.
So stay tuned, stay informed, and stay engaged. The future of Cambodia's development is being written right now, and you have a role to play in shaping it.
That's it for the deep dive. Until next time, keep learning, keep questioning, and keep diving deeper.